He had carried it in his wallet for 41 years, a paper ticket folded in half along a crease so worn it had gone soft as cloth. The inks still legible if you held it to the light. Chicago to Portland, one way, August 14th, 1983. It had never been stamped, never been torn, and on the nights when Edward could not sleep, he would sometimes sit in the kitchen in the dark and take it out and hold it against his palm, not quite looking at it, the way a person holds something they are not ready to put down and not ready, even now, to use. Welcome to the Lamplit Hour, where every story is a small light left on for someone who needs it. If stories like this bring you comfort, take a moment to subscribe and stay a while. Edward Hale was 73 years old, and he lived alone in a house that had once felt too small for all the living that went on inside it, and now felt, on most days, almost precisely the right size for a man and his habits. The house, where it was a craftsman bungalow on a street of elms in a suburb of Indianapolis, the kind of neighborhood where people still raked their own leaves and brought soup to sick neighbors, where the mailman knew your name and the woman 3 doors down kept a bird feeder shaped like a lighthouse. Edward had a vegetable garden in the backyard that he tended with more commitment than it strictly deserved. He made his coffee strong. He read history in the evenings. He went to bed at 10 and woke at 5:30. Winter and summer alike, a habit left over from 40 years of teaching high school chemistry. He was not unhappy. That is important to say, and to say plainly. He had a daughter named Patricia who called him every Sunday and visited at Thanksgiving with her husband and their 2 children. He had a small circle of friends from the school years, retired teachers mostly, who met on Tuesday mornings at a diner called Faye's and talked about the news with the mild outrage of people who no longer had to do anything about it. He had his garden, he had his books, he had the particular contentment of a man who has arrived through long practice at his own company. And he had the ticket. He had moved it from wallet to wallet over the decades, the way you move a photograph of someone you loved. He'd carried it through his marriage to Diana, God rest her, who had passed 6 years ago now, gently and without fuss, which was the way Diana had done most things. He had not told Diana about the ticket, not because he was ashamed of it exactly, but because some things belonged to the person you were before, and it felt like a kind of courtesy to keep them there, tucked away where they could not complicate the present. His granddaughter Nina was the one who found it. She was 17 and visiting for a long weekend in October, ostensibly to do a school project on local history, actually, Edward suspected, because her parents were going through a difficult stretch, and the house on the Elm Street felt like a place to breathe. Nina was a quiet girl, observant, with her mother's dark eyes and a habit of noticing things that other people walked past. She had been Edward's particular companion since she was small, the one who sat beside him in the garden and asked the real questions, the ones that made him think. It happened on a Saturday afternoon. Edward had driven them to the library, and Nina had pulled a book from the stacks and settled into a chair by the window and opened it. And when she reached for her bookmark, she found she had left it in her jacket pocket. She looked across the reading table at her grandfather. "Can I borrow something thin?" she said, already reaching for his wallet on the table between them. "Front pocket," Edward said, not looking up. She found the ticket before she found a receipt or a card. She drew it out carefully, the way you handle something old, and unfolded it along its soft crease and read it. She did not say anything right away. She turned it over. She read the date. "Grandpa." He looked up. She held it toward him across the table, and something moved across his face, not surprise exactly. He had always known this moment might come, but something quieter, like the settling of a thing long held in suspension. "I know," he said. "Chicago to Portland," she said. "August 14th, 1983. I know what it says. She set it gently on the table between them. You've had this since before Mom was born. Edward picked it up and held it for a moment, his thumb on the crease, and then he folded it back along the old lines and slid it into his wallet. He looked at Nina for a long moment, this granddaughter of his with her careful eyes, and then he looked out the library window at the October street where leaves were lifting off the curb in small spirals. It was for a woman named Rosalind, he said. Nina waited. She was good at waiting, this girl. We were young, he said. I was 23. She was 22. She'd gone to Portland for graduate school, for a teaching certificate. I can't now remember the exact reason she gave, though I remember the way she looked when she said it. Standing in the parking lot of a Howard Johnson's in the summer, she looked like someone who was about to say a harder thing and then thought better of it. Nina said nothing. The library was quiet around them, the particular deep quiet of a Saturday afternoon when the serious browsers have arrived and the casual ones have gone. Edward paused. He thought about the word. Circling each other, he said finally. For about 2 years. We taught at the same school. She taught English. I taught chemistry. We ate lunch together. We talked in the hallways. We went to the same parties and always ended up in the same corner. And we both knew what it was, and neither of us said so. He paused again. That was the way of it back then, or maybe it was just the way of us. He told Nina the rest of it slowly, in the low voice he used when he was telling her something true. Rosalind had gone to Portland in July. He had written to her. Letters, real letters, on notebook paper, the way people wrote then. And she had written back, warm and steady and full of the small particulars of a new city, the smell of the rain, the way the light came through the trees on her walk to campus. And he had read every letter twice and put them in a shoebox under his bed and written back immediately and thought, one of these days. He had bought the ticket on a Tuesday in August. He'd driven to Union Station in Chicago on his lunch break and stood at the window and said, Portland, one way, and handed over the cash. And the woman behind the counter had printed the ticket and passed it through the slot, and he had walked back to his car with it in his pocket, feeling, for the first time in months, like a person with a plan. The train left at 7 on a Sunday morning. That gave him 8 days to pack a bag, to arrange for someone to water his plants, to call Rosalind and tell her he was coming. 8 days was enough. But he did not pack the bag. He did not arrange for the plants. He did not call. He was not able, afterward, to reconstruct the exact shape of his own hesitation. Cowardice was part of it. The particular cowardice of men who are afraid not of rejection, but of rightness, afraid that if the thing they want most turns out to be real, they will somehow fail it. There was also the quieter, more complicated fear that she had moved on, that the warmth in her letters was only friendship, and he had read into it what he wanted to see. And there was this too, which he had never quite admitted to himself until he said it aloud in the library that October afternoon. He did not, at 23, feel like a man worthy of the kind of love Rosalind seemed to offer. She was so particular, so full of attention and language, and an insistence on the best of things. He did not think he was the best of things. Sunday morning, August 14th, 1983, Edward Hale sat at his kitchen table in Chicago and watched the clock pass 7 and did not go. He had kept the ticket ever since. Did you ever talk to her again? Nina asked. I wrote to her that fall, Edward said. I told her I had meant to come and hadn't managed it. I didn't explain why. She wrote back. She said she understood. He paused. She was kind about it. That was Rosalind. She was almost always kind, even about the things that didn't deserve it. She didn't ask any of the questions I deserved to be asked. Did you keep writing? For a while. into the following year, and then the letters got shorter and less frequent, and then there was one from her in the spring. I can still see the handwriting on the envelope. And I told myself I would answer it on the weekend, and then the weekend came and went, and then another week, and then months had passed, and then I couldn't. He looked down at his hands. You know how that happens. The longer you wait, the harder it becomes, until finally not writing becomes its own kind of answer. Nina was quiet. She looked at her grandfather's hands on the library table, the knuckled, careful hands of a man who had spent his life measuring things in small increments, and she thought about the version of him who had sat at a kitchen table on a Sunday morning and let a train leave without him. Do you know what happened to her? She asked. No, Edward said. And then after a pause, I've thought about it over the years, but I never looked. They drove home from the library in the quiet that had settled between them. Not an uncomfortable quiet, but the kind that means something has been said that will need time to settle. Nina watched the October trees go by the window. Edward drove in the particular, careful way of a man who has never had an accident and intends to keep it that way. That night after dinner, Nina helped him with the dishes the way she always did, passing them wet from the rinse to be dried. And when the last pot was hung, she said, I could look if you wanted. I know how to find people. Edward dried his hands on the dish towel and hung it neatly on the rack. He looked out the kitchen window at the dark yard. She'd be 72, he said. I know. He was quiet for a long moment. The elm out front moved in the October wind, and its shadow moved across the kitchen floor. Let me think about it, he said. He thought about it for 3 days. He thought about it while he turned the garden beds for winter, and while he stood at Faye's diner with his coffee, and while he sat in the evenings reading without quite reading, turning pages whose words he would not have been able to recall the next morning. He thought about the kind of man who carries a train ticket for 41 years and what it means about him, whether it is a measure of devotion or a measure of cowardice, whether those two things can, in a person, be the same. He thought about Rosalind as she had been, the particular slant of her attention, the way she could make you feel in conversation that you had just said the most interesting thing she'd heard all week, when in fact you'd said something ordinary, the dark red scarf she wore in winter, the way she laughed, which started in her eyes before it reached her mouth, so that you always knew it was real. He thought about what he would say if she was alive and findable and willing to be found by a man who had bought a train ticket in 1983 and never shown up. On Thursday evening, he called Nina. Look, he said. He heard her breath, then the soft click of a laptop opening. Nina was careful and methodical about it, the way she was careful and methodical about most things, and she texted him updates over the following 2 days as she worked through the ordinary channels. Public records, an alumni database from the university in Portland where Rosalind had studied, a community chorus website from Clackamas County that listed a member with her name. On Friday evening, Nina called. She's in a town called Milwaukee, she said. It's right outside Portland. She's grandpa. She taught English at a high school there for 30 years. She retired 8 years ago. She's listed in the directory of a community garden association. Edward sat down at the kitchen table. Is she, he started. The listing was updated 6 months ago, Nina said. She's there. He did not speak for a moment. There's a phone number, Nina said gently. I know. Do you want it? He looked at the window. He looked at the calendar on the wall. He thought about the ticket in his wallet, folded along its soft crease. Chicago to Portland, August 14th, 1983, one way. Yes, he said. He did not call that night. He sat at the kitchen table with the number on a piece of paper in front of him, and he did not call. And he thought, with a kind of wry recognition, that he was doing the same thing he had done in August of 1983, sitting at a kitchen table, letting the moment pass. He called on Saturday morning at 9 o'clock, because that seemed like the hour when a person was awake, but the day had not yet committed itself to anything. It rang 3 times. He had prepared for an answering machine, had arranged his words for a machine. She answered. "Hello?" He had not prepared for her voice. It was older, of course it was older. He was not an idiot, but the cadence of it was exactly what he remembered, the particular way she lifted the end of a word. "Rosalind," he said, "this is Edward Hale." There was a silence on the line. It lasted long enough that he had time, in that silence, to become afraid. And then she said, "Edward." Not a question, not even quite a statement, something between the two, the way you say a name when you have said it many times to yourself and are not sure, hearing it suddenly aloud, if it belongs to the real world or only to the one inside your head. "I'm sorry to call out of nowhere," he said. "No," she said, and her voice was warm, immediately warm, which was Rosalind exactly. "No, don't be. I'm glad." A pause. "How did you find me?" "My granddaughter. She's 17. She found a train ticket." Another silence, and then Rosalind laughed, and he heard it start in her eyes before it reached her mouth, even over the phone, even across 41 years. "The ticket," she said. "You knew about the ticket." "I knew you bought one," she said. "You wrote to me. You said you were coming. You were very precise about it." "Chicago to Portland? August 14th, a pause. "I made my roommate stay home with me that Sunday. We made coffee and waited. You didn't come." He closed his eyes. "I know," he said. "I know I didn't." "I waited a long time for a letter explaining it," she said. "It was not accusation. It was just the truth, stated plainly, and she had always been a woman who preferred plain truth to careful omission." "I know," he said again. "I'm sorry. He thought about the word. Afraid was the right word, but it had taken him 41 years to find it. "I was afraid," he said, "of being a disappointment to you, and I ended up being one anyway, just in a different direction." "You weren't a disappointment," she said. "You were just absent." A pause. "That was its own kind of disappointment, but a different sort." He sat with that for a moment. "Did you," he started, "did you have a good life there in Oregon?" "I did," she said, and he heard the truth in it. "I had a very good life. I taught for 30 years. I have a son. He's 43 now, lives in Seattle. I was married for a long time. My husband, Frank, died 4 years ago. We had a good marriage." A pause. "It was a good life, Edward." "I'm glad," he said, and meant it entirely. "And you?" He told her about Diana, about the teaching years, about Patricia and the grandchildren. He told her about the house on the Elm Street and the vegetable garden and the Tuesday mornings at Faye's. He told her, in the way you summarize a life to someone who knew you before you lived it. All the landmarks, the coordinates. And she listened the way she had always listened, with her whole attention, so that he felt, even at 73 on a kitchen phone in Indianapolis, like he had just said something worth hearing. They talked for an hour and a half. Edward had not talked to anyone on the phone for that long since Diana. At the end of it, Rosalind said, "Why did you call, Edward, after all this time?" He thought about that. "Because I've been carrying a train ticket for 41 years, he said, and I thought it was time to at least acknowledge what it was for." "And what was it for?" she said gently. "You," he said. "It was for you. It was always for you." A long pause on the line. He heard her breathe. "Well," she said, finally, "that's a thing to carry." "It is," he said. "Are you going to come to Portland, Edward? Is that what this is?" "I don't know yet," he said honestly, "but I wanted to stop letting the train leave." She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "I have a garden too, you know. Community garden, out near the river. I'm there most Tuesday and Thursday mornings." He smiled. He had not expected to smile, but there it was. "I'll call you again," he said, "if that's all right." "It's all right," she said. He called her the following Saturday and the one after that. The calls settled into a rhythm. Saturday mornings at 9, an hour or sometimes 2. And he found himself, as the weeks went on, looking forward to Saturday mornings in a way he had not looked forward to mornings in some time. They talked about their gardens and about books. She had always read more than he did, and she described books to him the way she had always described things, with enough precision to let him see them. They talked about their children and their grandchildren. They talked about the years between, carefully at first, and then more freely, the way two people talk when they have agreed, without quite saying so, to be honest with each other. If this story is staying with you, a quiet like helps me keep the lamp lit for others. In November, she sent him a photograph in the mail, a recent one, her in the community garden, holding up a rather impressive squash with an expression of pure satisfaction. She looked, at 72, like herself, older as he was older, but herself in all the essential ways. He put it on the refrigerator. Nina saw it at Thanksgiving. She stood in front of it for a moment with her plate of pie, and then she looked at him across the kitchen. "You called her," she said. "I did." And we talk on Saturdays." Nina looked at the photograph again. "She has kind eyes," she said. "She does," Edward said. It was Patricia who suggested Portland. She said it at the Thanksgiving table, plainly and without fanfare, which was Patricia's way. "Dad, why don't you go see her? Just go." "It's not that simple," he said. "It's a plane ticket," Patricia said, "or a train." She paused. "I think you've earned a train." Edward looked at his daughter for a moment. This practical, loving woman who is so much like her mother in the best ways, and something in him shifted quietly, the way ice shifts in late February, when the temperature moves a single decisive degree. He told Rosalind on the Saturday call after Thanksgiving that he was thinking of coming in the spring. He said it the way he had said things, sometimes in chemistry class, when he wanted students to engage with a hypothesis, tentatively but precisely. "The spring," she said. "April, maybe, when the garden is getting started." A pause, and then, "I'll have coffee ready," she said. He booked the ticket in December. Not a train this time. He was 73 years old, and the direct flight from Indianapolis to Portland was 4 hours, and he was not a man who needed to make things harder than they needed to be to make them feel real. The ticket was real enough. He paid for it on his laptop on a Tuesday evening, and when the confirmation email arrived, he printed it and held it in his hands for a moment. And then he went to his wallet and took out the old ticket, the one from 1983, and he laid them side by side on the kitchen table. Chicago to Portland, one way, August 14th, 1983, and Indianapolis to Portland, round trip, April 9th, 2025. He sat there for a while, looking at them both. He thought about the young man who had bought the first one and driven home, and sat at his table and let the Sunday morning pass without moving. He thought about what that man had been afraid of, and whether he had been right to be afraid. And he decided after a while that it didn't much matter now. You could spend your life auditing the past, measuring what you had done against what you might have done. But at the end of that accounting, you were still at your kitchen table, The question was only what you did next. He put the old ticket back in his wallet. He would carry it a little longer. Nina called him on a Thursday evening in March, just to check in, the way she'd gotten into the habit of doing. "1 more month," she said. 3 weeks and 2 days, Edward said. He heard her smile over the phone. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified," he said without hesitation. "That's good," Nina said. "Terrified means it matters." He thought about that after he hung up. Terrified means it matters. He wrote it on the notepad by the phone and looked at it for a few days, and then tore it off and put it in his desk drawer, which was where he kept the things that seemed important but did not need to be on display. The morning of April 9th was overcast in Indianapolis, the sky the color of old pewter, but the elms were a new leaf, and the garden beds were showing the first green of the season, and it felt, all of it, like a beginning, which was the right way for a departure to feel. Patricia drove him to the airport. She held his arm in the drop-off lane in a way that was not entirely necessary for a man who walked perfectly well, and he let her. "Call me when you land," she said. "I always call when I land," he said, which was true. "And call me after," she said. He looked at her, his practical and loving daughter. "I will," he said. The flight was smooth and unremarkable, the way the best kinds of travel are. He had a window seat, and somewhere over Utah, the clouds broke, and he could see the mountains below, their shadows laid long and blue across the snow. He looked at them for a long time. He was not a sentimental man about nature, exactly, but he had taught enough young people to know that the world still had the capacity to look the way it looked in photographs, and it seemed worth noting when it did. He had arranged with Rosalind to meet at the community garden. This had been her suggestion, offered with a practicality he recognized from 41 years ago, the understanding that a neutral place, an outdoor place, was kinder to two people meeting again after so long than a restaurant, where you had to negotiate menus and the performance of ease. The garden was near the river, she had told him. There was parking. She would be there at 11. He took a cab from the airport. Portland was green in April, in a way Indianapolis was not quite yet. The green of a place that had been rained on thoroughly, and recently, the grass almost startling in its color. He watched it go by the cab window and thought about Rosalind's letters from decades ago, the smell of the rain, the way the light comes through the trees. She had described it exactly right. She had described most things exactly right. The garden was at the end of a gravel path off a side road near the river, bounded by a low wooden fence, with raised beds in various states of April preparation, some already showing the early greens of kale and chard, others still turned to earth, waiting for seed. He paid the driver and got out and stood for a moment on the path looking through the fence. She was already there. He would have known her anywhere. He understood that when he saw her, understood it as a simple fact, with no sentiment attached. You knew some people across time the way you knew certain books, not by memorizing them, but by having read them in a way that left a mark. She was standing over a bed of early lettuce with a trowel in her hand, and her hair, still dark mostly, with silver at the temples, caught under a wide-brimmed canvas hat, and she was bent slightly forward with her full attention on the thing in front of her, which was how she had always given her attention to things. He unlatched the gate. She heard it and turned. For a moment, neither of them said anything. They looked at each other across the garden path, an old man and an old woman in the April green, and there was something very quiet and very large in that looking, the 41 years of it. The letters and the silences and the long, ordinary lives run parallel to each other across all those miles and seasons. And he thought about what it means to keep a light on for someone, not dramatically, not loudly, but the way you keep a lamp on in a window, a small warmth against the dark, not knowing if anyone will ever see it, but keeping it on just the same. "Edward," she said. "Rosalind," he said. She crossed the garden path and stopped an arm's length away and looked at him with her whole face, the way she looked at things. There were lines he didn't remember and a sureness in her bearing he found himself grateful for, a woman who had come to herself fully over these years, which was exactly what he had hoped for her, which was, he thought, perhaps a kind of love all its own. "You're here," she said. "I'm here," he said. She reached out and touched his arm, briefly, the way you touch someone to confirm they are real and not a thing you have imagined. Then she nodded once, toward the garden. "Come see what I'm growing," she said. He followed her down the path between the beds, and she talked about the lettuce and the early kale and the peas she had put in along the south fence. And he asked questions and offered the occasional observation from his own garden, and she listened and responded, and the conversation moved between them as naturally as breathing. They were not 22 and 23. They were 73 and 72. They had buried people they loved and raised children who turned out well and spent 30 years in classrooms watching young people figure out how the world was put together. They had earned the ease of two people who know, at this stage of things, what matters and what doesn't. They walked the whole garden twice and then sat on a bench near the south fence where the sun had come through. Rosalind poured coffee from a thermos. She had brought 2 cups, which Edward noted with a warmth he could not have articulated precisely. "I thought about you," she said, after a while. "Over the years, I won't pretend I didn't." "I thought about you too," he said. "Constantly at first, and then less, and then just always, quietly in the background." "That's the honest kind," she said. "It is," he said. He reached into his pocket and took out his wallet and unfolded the old ticket and held it in the April light. She looked at it. 41 years, she said. 41 years? She was quiet for a moment. "Why did you keep it?" He thought about that. He had thought about it for a long time, and still, the answer was not simple. "Because it reminded me that I had wanted something enough to buy the ticket," he said finally. "Even if I couldn't go, even if I was too afraid to go, the ticket was proof that I had felt it." She looked at the ticket in his hand. Then she looked at him. "You could put it down now," she said gently. "I think you've carried it long enough." He looked at the ticket, the soft crease, the ink still legible. Chicago to Portland, August 14th, 1983. He thought about the Sunday morning he had let pass. He thought about the letters and the shoebox and the long years of a good life, lived with only this tucked away inside it. He thought about Diana, who had been a fine and loving woman, and who would not, he thought, begrudge him this. He thought about the October library and Nina's careful eyes. He thought about the phone on Saturday mornings and the photograph on the refrigerator and the flight over Utah and the mountains' shadows on the snow. He folded the ticket once more along its crease and held it for a moment. Then he set it on the bench between them. "Tell me about the peas," he said. Rosalind smiled, and it started in her eyes the way it always had, and she told him about the peas. They sat on the bench for another hour and talked about gardens and grandchildren and the way certain books stayed with you and the particular pleasure of having time now to do things properly. The sun moved in its April way, warm and then briefly hidden and then warm again. The river made its sound somewhere beyond the fence. The garden grew around them, quietly, the way things grew. He did not know exactly what this was or what it would become. He was 73, not 23, and he had learned enough to know that not everything had to be named to be real, and not every arrival had to look like the arrival you had once imagined. He was here. She was here. The ticket had been redeemed at last in the only currency it had ever been worth. The actual presence of a person in the actual light, in the actual spring, no longer carrying the weight of the road, not taken, but sitting instead in a garden in Oregon, listening to someone he had loved, who was telling him about peas. That evening, in the small hotel near the river, he called Patricia. "How was it?" she said, before he even spoke. "Good," he said, and then, because it was more than that, because it was precisely the thing he had needed it to be. It was very good. He could hear her smiling. He looked out the hotel window at the Portland evening, the city going golden in the last of the light, the river catching it, the trees along the bank carrying it upward into the sky. He thought about a lamp in a window. He thought about what it meant to keep one lit for a long time in the dark. He called Rosalind the next morning before his flight. They made a plan for her to come to Indianapolis in June to see his garden and meet Patricia and sit at the Tuesday morning table at Faye's, where she would charm everyone immediately. Of that he was entirely certain. At the airport, going through security, he took out his wallet the way you do at security, and the old ticket came out with it, as it always had. The guard started to say something and then looked at it more carefully and didn't. On the other side, waiting for his shoes, Edward looked at the ticket one last time. Then he walked to a trash can and stood over it for a moment, the ticket in his hand. He did not throw it away. He folded it carefully and put it back. Some things you carry not because you have to, but because they are part of the account of yourself, the record of what you were afraid of and what you loved despite the fear. The ticket was his. It always would be. But it was lighter now, lighter than it had been in 41 years, lighter than he could have imagined it becoming. Because now it was not only the record of a journey not taken, but the beginning of the one that was. He picked up his bag and walked to the gate. Outside the windows, Portland was clear and green in the morning, the mountains visible on the horizon, white-peaked, calm. He stood for a moment, looking at them. Then he sat down to wait for his flight home. There is something quietly heroic about the things we carry. Not the things we carry in triumph, but the ones we carry in the long, dark middle of life, when no one is watching, and we are not sure ourselves why we haven't put them down. Edward carried a train ticket for 41 years. Not as a wound exactly, and not only as a regret, but as a small light kept alive in the dark of a wallet, a witness to the fact that he had felt something true and had not, despite everything, stopped feeling it. Most of us carry something like that, a name we don't say aloud, a door we didn't walk through, a moment we have never quite been able to leave. We are, all of us, walking around with our own soft creased tickets, our own proof that we once wanted something enough to buy our way toward it. The question the ticket asks is not whether we went, it is whether we will. Thank you for spending this hour with me. If you'd like more stories like this one, subscribe. And I'll leave the light on for you next time. Rest well.